Again, to Anne Fink, that was a really great exercise that we just had, and I think it raised many issues that we can follow up on.
Tanda ge en lagi tanda cegu cider wa tilatene de tenga so cegu tape ya pu cider ba tilatene de tenga so ge tridir cia ge ani joshi nenga te mampu cidus lang sons tene yang shi ne gen la ya ne sama ge tu chi shiro chi sa.
So I was making notes during the activity so that I could do the debrief. I'm thrilled that Anne is coming back, and so she will continue with this to try and answer some of the questions that may have come up during the activity.
The gang tanda cegu the drip because minister ge tanda de tan drebe ge draw open land there che tangarang ge mane dus center tapcha yes in bana ya gela tanda ta thone yang she phe de ta ne se sula draw open the tondri open ne do land jagin sigdus.
So one of the great things about this exercise that you can use in your own classrooms is that it provides an opportunity to learn about misconceptions and any confusions that students have.
Tanda dege cegu de kare sena cegu dege khurang ge ta chi chechi chi kare sena jema cherang zanda na dinero peche ta bai bai na thopthila ya ni ku to norba tina do kanda do chindo yena khusula ku no thai parwa ani chi thichom ge rang je kanda do chindo te ta ha ku ya la ya ani cegu de shi pheng dus.
It also allows us to see what gaps there might be in the learning that you have had before.
Tem se ne ngoma che su ge jang yer da yamba jang ba te tan ni tan dan ni ge parola ya ni perche ka chu chi heba ka chu chi do te ha ko ayam pek dus.
For instance, the idea that axons can communicate directly with other axons is new.
The picha shaba na nga su ge da che sa ten tan da che sa ten parola ya ko ge chi da pha sa tong lan che chi yorwa o te gi ta chu ti ba ne tan tan din zda na ne sa ba cha do was.
That's because we are accustomed to teaching the general idea, the majority, and not the exception to the rule.
Ta te kalchine re se stamba namjang asu tris tamba la ya chila chapi ge tatsu te tane kange ma yo patela ya tuna shik chwa tere ma to pe ya mxe ge chi netun tinda do la ya tuna master bala tere dete chong bares.
We also had some issues come up more related to neurogenesis and plasticity and learning, which fortunately Anne has some experience with and therefore can be a good resource for you.
Tim se nga sola ya wangsa sawa tripa chikra neurogenesis wangsa sawa tripa te ta ani wangsa ge nyen shu ko la ya netong kha chi lam chi so sa te la ya tan da ge en la in bana chirgi ko ge leka ge thene nyamnyong yu cha ani tan da te ko la ya ani chi tu de chi la phembu shu dus.
It also raises the issue that when you are teaching your own science classes, if there is a topic that you are not comfortable with, you can always find additional resources or other people who know more about it and have them come and give a guest lecture.
Ya shenda chi de la tende tanga su kari ha ku yore se na ke ti chara ne somchen chi trip up su jo shi te thya la chara chi dang chu me ba ta diu me pai bai na ane chara la ya chi shenda ge da ju cha se na degree thong kong se tende pe chu tanga gi yore se pe cha sha ba na me shenda somchen te kang la ya ki ba yo su tende do ke tang de te ane tirang ta bo tende do den de chi de ta somchen te trick chi na de kores.
So with that, I'll turn it back over to Anne.
Tene ane again like zenda meteorologist.
Hello, good to be back for a little bit.
That's the last Nisha JB Go Jones.
So I know we had some questions that were unanswered, and I wanted to give a little time to answer those.
Yang tua you by banner or Ngoma Majet or Tendo by banner, let this down the land against a lot there.
Nothing on the Tira, on the Tasu, the Tunism, Adila, Dagets in the lens of the Nero. That Dagets that didn't give on the Tasu Lubukoram and Zarna, Tabina, and that do Mares. The Chiche. And to anybody, Tamazo Chigi, Pigin and Penny. 아니 달레단다 먼저 다시 도단디 요치 남기 먼저 삼문단 곰 겸이 나нул라 먼저 침받는 중도
아하
어딘지 컨디스토시 저 차기나 스준당 한데간데 나스라
or signal the shalom mayamati gonja bainer
나노 삼모기
two questions. The first one is if the axon is connected to the cell body instead of other end of the neuron, will that also transmit neurotransmitters if the axon is connected directly to the cell body? And the second question is if the stimulus is not external, and it is internal, for instance, doing meditation or contemplative practices, how this initiate that signal transmission?
Oh, these are really good questions. So the first one, yes, you can have an axon release neurotransmitter onto a soma. And there usually aren't as many receptors, but depending on the cell, sometimes there are receptors on the soma. And then it can very quickly affect that cell's firing.
The yoris tanga so sobasne soliro at the tapungul litiro, tapungul litila ya ko dashisatene dalubadine yoris, that is the tapungul ligi gangalaya, and nilemba mampu yoris, the stambalaya koge datilande, and koge yalente in jopugonete, the youngres.
And the second, remind me what the second question was?
Second question is internal stimulus. Like meditation.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. That's something I don't have as much expertise in.
That the coach do singalam bana cheli tanda yang gom nyam tu at the means.
But it's also important to know that our nervous systems are kind of working away and doing things, even when there isn't outside stuff coming in. So it's still firing, synapses are still communicating internally.
That's again when I took a lepa tanda once a malachi or once a malati koranga daya matayata, ane lunjini batriachi or data, and it's cholone kurangla kuchinchi mepa in bana lepagin now look in it attended the young cook that niata, ane Kasa de salon chiachuro de yunguyores.
So as I think you know, our thoughts by choosing to think about things, by choosing to behave in certain ways, we can cause similar stimuli inside as might be caused as stimuli coming from the outside. I don't think I said that very well. Was that okay?
Yeah, it's okay, it's okay. Tanda chicken banana switch tondo chikola samle tambatayana, some chikola samle tambala tended the thing as sole pagnala, chiselon chiat on that nachgorwa. They are chaloni kitchen joana, zenko salon chiat on that one, they youngures.
So I hope that spoke to the question.
Tell a length therapy, yes?
Genga tuade. Tanda ngajo ne nitsu mumpuji chilo ya ne ya level ya dade loda de zida guni level le ani de nitsu mumpuji nyatsa chi do. Cheza tinde ge nitsu nyatsa chi ya ge nitsu mumpu de zida gi ngol ne nyatsa chi go re loda ngol ne go ane kandada chi ga ya level nyatsa chi de go res. Tanda kurong namsha chi na seri.
My question is how we store the information inside our brain. Is a form of a chemical or electrical signals, or how the information is stored in our brain or in our memories?
Yeah, so how is information stored in our brains? I think you can actually see some of that in your pictures of learning. So I'm curious what other people have to say based on the activity.
That Kashim Bananga Suge Dinala Kasa, Nitsu Saba Jamba in a Kanda Yungres, Chesuruchi Triorwa, Tignala Chikungoyonguyores, Tina and Deshichioris, Chesunane, Kanda Snyerguyoris, Tingala Chesukarikongus. 괜찮아요.
아주 지나 단다디 단체만 남바시야 지나 다 시바도 요레스 시비기 니 템바 대년이 되고 요레스 대시고라 시바기 강시고라 저는 세리기 지와이나 로다데 제다랑 걸마 진디시 제고도 저도 대인디 템바데 유리모니스 몸보지 냐데데 다지 몰니 거라 다 시바세야디 자이나 데스답디고도 자고라 저는 다디 되나로지
예, 다 시바세야데 consciousness 라고 거라
레레요
in Buddhist philosophy, how we keep our memories or how we store information is by our consciousness. And in the neuroscience, we may need to talk in the terms of chemical and electric signal. Or is that right? Or is anybody? Room there.
I think in neuroscience, the short-term memory was stored at hippocampus.
Yeah, sonda.
Tanda again getting 11 the short term memory dinga hippocampus na dichigido ina the long term memory di ganzo frontal cortex na la dichigora ta cheda de ani neuron mangbo chigi onda gi thujam jira dewa di chadambo jidamba ina ndi kapsu temba di temba te da ani kale kale ko dewa di la yondu ani temba di kale ga rashu gi nyam do jira inde gi sar samgit
In case on right.
So I may add to the Kelvin. So he said that the short-term memories are stored in hippocampus, and also like long-term memories are stored in the frontal cortex, in a way that neurons communicate with each other, and there is strong connections made. So through this way, I think the memory is stored.
Yeah, so I think, and it's interesting to connect that to the Buddhist idea of kind of memory being stored in consciousness, because, consciousness we see as this emergent property of electrical and chemical signals within our bodies and brains.
Da tandagi nitan detala teneta gilan chagarwa asu temba tan detala tene detirwa ani ta wansa cherk tene shepa bana lepag nangla ta zida to loda gi chi ku cheli mangpu chi de korwa de tak cheli la tene dete ani chungwa gi namba chi la ya ta tandanga su gi karsa rikpa sagrwa ta sheba sagrwa sheba de shagres.
And so also, yes, we think that, memories, a lot of memories come into the hippocampus, and short-term memory is stored there through plasticity. And then that memory, to become long-term, goes into the frontal cortex and some other areas of cortex where it lasts a very long time, also through plasticity.
Da chicken baranga suge chigita Duin Tungula near Tembachi or Tembatsunga Suganda Sutamana like when you're such at the uncle, that turns some triatong Atenado, Gijurama Chiletan Jungorwa, and it takes Jelaya, and Ekota, a Jun Pula near Junig Tembana, and Sugan Dunshagan Ion Gorisra, Tina on the day co Ane co Jun Puta, Tina Nayanko. And
actually, if people would like, I have a couple slides I pulled up on plasticity that kind of illustrates how plasticity can happen. Will people be interested in seeing that?
Yes, I think so. Tanda de la gela de once in she don't debig any co Lotanian Kashi Tadichi Shayes, de la Tanya to go to Esa. Yes, the
okay. Okay. So where are we? So these are slides I usually use to teach about plasticity when I teach a neuroscience class.
Da de la te ngarang ge wangsa senri ki ta wangsi nyen shiko typical special ta ya ge ne lokta nyen ri tinda yens.
So I have this quote that defines plasticity from a paper. It says it's the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connections.
That de somi chitri and tigi na la kusha juge ane ta su ge dom skna uchi yes rwa ta wansi nyen shi sena karsukore sena ane karsukore ta chlok ke ta intrinsic system bala ane ko ta kuchin sakro ta kunchin te namba ni kuchin ni te la ya yalen tupi ge gane ane nga su ge chakore tane jelere tane kore tude chigoro dewa chigoro te la yan jirwa tang thya ge ne wansa niba gi wansi malak niba chigoro o te la ya wansi ge nyen shi grace.
So this is how I might illustrate plasticity. I have a little animation between let's say two neurons that are connected by a glutamatergic synapse.
Ta tanda dikarin sena ngasu ge karsa chi jambala tene deti ro jambala tene deti ane wangsi ge nyen shi choro wangsa ge nyen shi ti mar chontun chi gi pichun chi yens.
And we'll see a lot of stuff that you drew in your sheets.
Da de na senge chesu ge ya su ge remove ga trisha ju ti yon del tongres.
So we have these two neurons. Here's the synapse between them. Like we described, when one neuron spikes, there's an excitatory synaptic potential that when glutamate is released from the synapse, and if there's enough of these, then the second cell can spike.
Da de la ya once has ni to bache once has ni paro la ya tun sam te da yo ro ne once has tangpo te na ne ne lenju ni ba chik tem bache ni chik ni ba tem ba te ne shu kan la kan sa chambo je je ko thum sin je len ro th pai ba na ne ko da once has ni ba te na la ya ko lenju ni ba te tent ko res.
And so this is communication between neurons, kind of like what we drew.
Da de once has ni paro la ya da kan sto ko materials te nga su ge mu tro te tan da was.
So when these cells are active, when they spike together, something special happens. The connection between them gets stronger.
Da once has ni ge ro ko da tang de tang khora ni sha da de da tang ya te chikpa do cha ba na ane ko da chi de la ya man ro chi chung go res kar chung go res tam bala khora ni ko paro go thun chen ti shu chir du yo res.
So this animation will kind of illustrate that.
Da da ge rumu de ge khora ni ko thun chen shu chir du a chi go ro de tang ge yes.
So first the presynaptic cell fires, then the postsynaptic cell fires. Imagine this happens a lot together.
Da da de ro nga su thun chen ngong ge wan sa tha ji te ge ko da de tang go or da ko selon chi go ro ani te ge che la ya thun chen je ge te yon ko selon chi go ro ten da do da ko mut te mang bo chong wa ji la ya sam dang chis.
Then you can actually see, and this is something I actually measured in cells, an increase in the size of the excitatory synaptic potential. So you're having more synaptic transmission between the cells.
Da tela tene de tan de tong se che ja ten rest ko salon chi nu ta kar sa de salon chi ge thun sam ge lenju ni bater do te yan ko chir do ba de do se jet kdus.
And then, I don't think it showed up right on this slide, but you can also have an increase in the size of either the dendrites or you might have more release from the axon, or you might have the axon kind of grow more connections with the dendrite. So this connection can actually physically grow bigger.
Tata remove la teme pa imbana dela ya signature nge ko jima tege dalen satenti chi chir duwa ngwa tana du kore tina shinge korani ko paroge ni chi da ta ya te mang du bala ya tana du kores.
So this is a very simple view of plasticity, but this is how plasticity can happen in the brain. And we think that, the growth of synapses, new synapses, or making synapses stronger, and increased electrical signaling and chemical signaling between cells, this is plasticity. We think this is how learning happens.
That they think I so once again she said it is once again she can do jungle I so can is sawachi jamba in bana can do jungle you may take it on is that they can simbana so get Kasaparoge that is which do it once again center do it and the paroge that could consent the turn do it and send chair and it paroga that amount and on do a chorwa they told it and they think they think as once again she did that tap do on its on the dinner is.
And so when these changes last for a very long time, maybe a lifetime, in a big population of cells, we think that's where memories are living.
That did do in Juruate ko ane ko that hapon la mampu nang la roan dina do in Juruate touching Matich Kanzanda or like neighbor in Bina, the ticker is stumble and then I'll let you temper set any yours.
Cool. So that's it. That's my slide. I wonder if that was helpful.
That and the tent Taranja and it take Pemburo Johnson S. Pembu Johnson S. Yes, it's helpful.
Oh, good.
One question. Can you take another question?
Sure. I can take another question.
Yeah, close on.
근데 지난번에 팀버 당단지로 팀버 당에 대해서 무슨 미기인데 내가 간대지 통고 말하다 로유로 출가보도 아디리디 대이면 팀버 당수도 좀 남중한지 다다고 임바나 다치기 둘치기 담니 치 파도 아니 담아대 거야지 연거로
그래
다디나신 간데 팀버 당세디 제산다 내주치기 임바 내주디 킹이다 근데 단다디 갈라왔다 팀벌라이죠. 다 제대로 나로 뒤로도 뭐 찌기 야지 베드 키도고로 양찌기 찌기라 두스 투니 아니고 타마기게 내주 깨깨죠로 간데리다고 내주야 달랭게 나 수마테긴스 두스 뭐 기름지 고라디 나로 어디 페나 다나시르웨스고 당에 튀어도도디 다두니 이만 다두 찌기찌가 담이 도데고로 어디 나시 차고로 간데시레레디
Since we cannot see the neuronal signal transmissions, so it's really difficult for us to imagine that. So when we think about like the sound waves, so the sound, the voice is transmitted from one person to another. How that transmit from one place to another is the vibration of the molecules in between, the air molecules. That way that signal is transmitted from one place to another. When we talk about the signal transmission in the synapses, how is that transmitted? Like the sound wave, or how that's transmitted? It's really difficult for me to imagine or just have a visual presentation of that transmission process.
So if I just show this slide again, this is I'm going to skip ahead to another slide. You can actually record from two neurons. So these are neurons in the hippocampus, where we've learned a lot about learning and memory through looking at the hippocampus.
That the chitang is the digger system of Sutamaganana, or Sutamanana bigger once again, Tesco Copachins, the Dickups in Bana, Dickups, Nasuga, the Kuganana, that dress or what, Salonchi, moving us in the change it curious.
And doing that, we can record the electrical signals, so we can really see them. And they look like, they look like this. So you can get an electrode in there and you can record the electrical signals and see them talking to each other.
아하. 다단다 제가 수 통트크리스에 단다게 되 로다고 ngola yoparwa. 로다고 ngola yopate ngasu 체자치 두스 통트크요레스다. 데 the once has any pansulaya da toilet chigopate and then as to start lockdown you pateka to say generation to stunt grace.
So when we look at these figures, here's a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron, and this cell is firing, that cell is firing. These are actually the same picture. And this is an excitatory synaptic potential. These aren't made up. These are actually recordings I took years ago.
That under the Casembaranga Sutunsengi, once it has it on Tunsenji, once it has it to Akoganalaya, Linjun Niba Timba, Linjun Niba Timba Tela, then that Tamputele Linjun Niba Triba Latin data, Parotela Koga, Tunselaya, Linjun Niba Jongorwa. I think Chela Tunsenji, once it has the Linjun and Jongorwa. They look the Kashimolaya, Narange, Tashi Cups, Senjeju in the Yins.
Yeah, so when I record this middle signal here, I recorded this from a neuron and stimulated a different neuron, and this is one neuron talking to another.
That day, by once it has a chila, salon she did do Tindado Chibalat the Tarwa. Once it has a chila, salon Chibalat and the Shenda till that content do say that in those Tungochi Juniors.
So I wonder how it is to see that.
Yeah. Another question? This lengthy this again. Yeah.
So I just have a question. That is, we know that neuron function degeneration may be associated with protein misfolding, right? Structure, function, and protein misfolding. So since neuron plasticity is associated with our habit formation, can our habit not prevent protein misfolding? So that was.
I think this is not my area of expertise, so that's a very good question, but I don't know. I will say that some of the protein misfolding that can happen is genetic or due to other injuries, and so that stuff can't really be prevented.
I was also going to point out.
I want him to translate his question first. Sorry.
Chabung nanglo la zawe nganzo di keje dang choba dadende sangma kare la na nganzo sokun nanglo la keje dadende sangma tize gi kyoba la yuwa thone nganzo sokun nanglo keje di chungwa rwa ta dide indi gopsala ani da nganzo plasticity ga keje shidi gopsala ani susu chebe thoni nganzo sokun nanglo la tize gi kyoba de la yuwa dwa yore mere la ra kisi kyoba de yuwa dwa yimba ina ani nganzo wangza naza de yang kare la na di ta wangzan naza di ha nganzo xian yo ra susha zage nganzo naza di so nganzo wangzan naza so shungsan sama khare la na tize ge gyoba la gyuba temne ani nganzo wangzan naza di shungwa ra ani nganzo chebe thoni nganzo tize ge gyoba de gyuba tanga yo melen di ni ge kenal thiwa di
to de che ti le chitang bana tanda de ngarange ane cheli tan doatina mares ni shendai bana ngasu tjege ko chokolan jrondwala to mis folding sena ko tepsok ta no as gorwada ta no atina thebeati ani ma shishin do chinga so yang rigzige tenide tan gore rigzi jindele tan yongores. Yes.
No, I was going to say, when you asked that question, there are two neuroscientists sitting here, and we both thought, oh, I don't know. So we had to think about it. So there are going to be questions that we haven't thought about directly, and then we have to try to figure it out. And that's the way science works. Somebody else will do that research if they try to make that connection.
aha ta tanda gen la tro te transtambala ya nga su pha de la ya wansa seri pa ni ye simba da nga su la samlo na tro te kro kor ma so os nga su ge chele gi tin ro chi ma res imba na ya ta yang te tan jewi gi yang ko takshe chi ni shenda tin da yo ro yang takshe chi ni shenda ya ti ge pa ro la yang ko dewa the no len se go yo pa tin da no yo res.
And it's a very good question in terms of what plasticity can do and activity dependence, but as Anne pointed out, many things are already programmed and they're not activity dependent, so the activity wouldn't change that pre-program.
Aha ta da de pe ya go du sta wang su wang sa ne shi ta tane ko gi da chi je le ta che gu chi go ro ti gi khabar kar yu me tiki parola eche perkari yo me ti tema tense kuro ata tiki je shekdu ti ba na yang shenda tanda gene en lagi so ba bana tanda en ko cheku ti kari ba na nga so rizila tene ta tampo kuro ko ta chi tendru chi khede chi kuro ti stambala ya ne cheli tile ya tengire te mare se ge ne tante khachi du son ti nga so ge ta kar su ta joshi ba so na chi ayang ko tela ya sabza chi gu sa tuno chi gu sa je chi re dus.
And one more challenge. Would you think about an experiment that you could do that would demonstrate if your idea or hypothesis about the relationship was true?
Aha da ya chela ya chi trust tam bai bai na tan da chorong ge sameg samsiti ta samsiti chosha do chi la sha bai bai na chosha te ani ku ta ra tru chi ta yam na dik yue me ra tru chi la ya ne tak she chi dab tik service.
And you don't have to do it now, but that's something to think about. What would that experiment look like?
Aha ta tan da tru gu ta na ma re sim bai na ke ti jima chi la ta na do drip ge wan ta tam bai bai na ta tak she chim ji ti kan da do chi in service.
Other questions?
Trajamba tanda yutha tanda wachila kashi chikala pachang de sta ya gela
Ni dewa chi shu chu chi chidang wanza thiri dan dewa yo me te se wara ngia ku maswa ni dewa ti kai sen di pene nganzo semchen mangbu chi kyo ko kema thak tu ne ko karse wo re khola chi numa thungya da ame numa thungya de lab mo go chi koran su gi singya de ne to
re
디 간데스 차기 위해 직체
aha
이내 양은서 부고 가시 직게 개왕 갈수 왔다 지금 마메기 루기 망부 대야겠다 되네기 루기 망부 대용해야 되네 또
aha
디서 지 완전 생릭당 믹스기 직 디토를 디셰 가려요 나 디직 세우직 송로지 소디 쉐
I have two questions. I'm not really sure it's really related or connected with the neuroscience that we're talking about here. My question is, some of the offsprings, the babies, the animal babies, they, as soon as they are born, they have the instinct to find the milk and suck it. And also, some people, some human beings, they remember their previous lives, the past lives. Is there any way or any explanation from neuroscience about that kind of characteristics that animals have?
I can definitely speak to the first part. So yes, there are reflexes that babies have, like rooting for milk, that we lose after we're infants, and those are reflexes that are basically programmed into the brain. So that's question number one.
That and that tampo te imbaina wa ngasu chirgi imbaina the reflexes reg do ngasu ko donggo tirwa ta donggo semche rigla ya tampo chiwa ta jiga masa dwa ta numa nuya chiwa wa te rete donggo tires ta donggo ge jetang te ngasu ke lepik na tele ko da mas na diksha yores ku chiate.
And the second part, I have no idea, and I'm so interested to hear what this room thinks about the second question.
That one you put in by na tikolaya, the lenting I'm by na pet the chame jumechi yens, this tambalayan, Chesuki Kanaduchi Gungo Nastikola. Yeah, len yeah. Len ayo sa.
Tadi dewa chima di ki len di chik ni rob si shuwa ina rwa. Chida nganzo des namsha des thade chawarwa. Nangbe ngoi ne samlo tangda cheba ina chik kewa nga chik namsha sa dik chik yuebe to yore slab de warwa. Din du ya ngaran so ki thoni cheba ina kewa nga chik ki thoni ya chik din so la len dang dine ki chik dishe tisu kya to. Des namsha thade ki wang ya chik des mita wa dus kewa nga chik yuebe kengi ani kewa nga chik tin chik din so dishe kya yores o dine shwe.
They're laughing because he says to answer my question briefly. So they're laughing. So briefly, we have different theories or philosophies about this. From our point of view, we believe in the previous and the next lives. So since we believe in rebirth, from that point we can explain some of this phenomena of remembering past lives.
So one thing I'm going to remind you about science, neuroscience, and science generally is we are restricted by the tools that we have. So I cannot think of any tool that we have currently that would allow us to measure that. And in the same way, I challenge that last question to think of an experiment that you would be able to do to establish the answer. You would have to think of an experiment to do to be able to answer that question. And remember, we are constrained by our experiences. So actually, a good part of why I am interested in teaching you science is so that you can ask the questions that you have the background to be able to explore.
Ani tria te tan dene ni susu ge nyamyon ta shisha gi jabjon tela ten te ta tela lens he ta lente bchia chorwa o te ta she che te ani awang sa tria tela ya go yes.
And the last thing I will say is you are absolutely right. It is not related to what we're talking about.
Da shenda chi ka se stambala ya chorong ge sheba taran jares tanda chorong ge tria te ne awang sa la ya da do che midus.
But Anne, if it's possible, could you spend a little bit more time talking about the development and loss of the reflex? Do you have that ready to go in terms of why or how babies lose that ability?
Oh, I have no slides and I'm not an expert.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
But yes, well, okay. So everybody knows about the knee-jerk reflex, right? When you tap under the knee with a hammer and you kick.
Patellar reflex.
Right. The tanda ye chun kapsu chi amaze so numa niya la so pati gelagi se paina nga chu ge donggu re lag dwa donggu te la pana te dat gisha ju den res tandi baina tela ya tata ju songa yo system la gelagi tanda de ta chi chu donggu system la nga chu kampa pimu dus te tande su paina pimu yang go ach dwa donggu to haku was. Yes, they know about that knee reflex.
Yeah. Well, so first babies have special ones when they're born, including when you touch their face, they'll root for milk. They'll go looking for milk. They have a reflex on their foot. If you do this, the foot fans out.
Da tena senge ko pugichon chen bana ko umatse ge dongo yo bataro lapat ka sa thu pai bana umatse ge duati bata ne lawa kampa ge shabla ya ele do che bana ko kampa ge zumu ka za chikum duata chang duage te dongo te yores kuzla.
Babies can actually swim too. They will hold their breath and they have a swimming reflex that goes away.
Da kusula da sum sena chi chu ge ge ya chi dongu yor wa tiang yor es ya kale kale yon do shagris.
So these are reflexes that are built into the nervous system. But then our nervous system, after we're born, it reorganizes over and over again and gets more complex. So we lose some of these things.
Da tim ba na tampu da su shi kapsula pagna la ya tanda dongon de tar wa ane chi tampu kredisha jutinda res da imba na su chinu ge je la ya ne shenda tinda jondar ma putis tamba la ya dongon dina do ri khashi ji ya lot we tinda yores.
And there's also something interesting about babies where they know the smell of the person who gave birth to them. When they come out, they've already learned this, and the smell, the maternal odor, is actually really important for learning attachment. And that's we could spend a whole 2 hours on that.
Da ya shenda kar system bala ya pugi ko ta chi ba kap su ko da nga so pugi te ama go tokono de because in bana ama ge chi ta smell system bala ya tuma se ko tuma te ku so go system bala ya ko chi ba bana ko ge ama ge tuma te chwa ge nyubati yores ta te ge Tiang ko share la ya tinga so ge ta dongu ge nambala yores ge to ta dige ko te nga so ge ji ga ta jibo no ba na chu ni skran la de se jaga te yores.
Yeah, so that was it. That was my little facts.
Yes.
Yeah, George.
That's all.
Tanda jisang tanda wanza tima nalo tanda dijo ra anju pina da imbai na da de tha ring dung le de tapina tha nyu ni ke jawe da tha ring ke jare ani enje sewo chedu ko ra anju ta di pin di enje sewo che de wangza di ani khora kha ni yebai na peche yang anju thira we imba na thide tha ring dung yong de lamna chor du gumda di tha nyu ni di tha ring ni sha thima de jamza chor du gumda da di le ya tha ring dung yewa che di wangza di ko kaga yuwa ina ya chigi dik tada lega de chitu ina wadi yenji dai di wangza nanola.
Now my question is about the function or the of neurons. For instance, function or the things that neurons do. For instance, sound. For sound, our neurons, our brain can differentiate a sound that comes from nearby or like far distance. And for smell, we cannot distinguish that is from far away or nearby. So, what kind of neuron is doing that sort of functions in our brain?
I might have a slide for that, so I'm just looking now.
Tichinagala tigi troati lenta dregi drevi ane nyamperchi statanda de tsede.
No, I don't think I have it, but so our different sensory systems have different types of cells, and they're structurally organized in completely different ways.
Tanga su wampu mando asukura wampu go wansur te mando alaya wampu go wansur te laya wampu mando alaya ne kurang go wansur gi kasukuri tati nilam basukura ta wansur nilam bata thapong te mando yoris mando yom ne mise ne kusu go kopa chhatang ta dikta te ya mando yoris.
The ear is kind of special because sound travels in waves, and I'm finding a picture of the cochlea in the ear that is lined with hair cells that can tell the frequency of the sound, so whether it goes up or whether it goes down, and how loud it is.
Nelemba chigorwa tigi karichigore dati lab kongola duwa lab kongola du stambala nanju nana yopi tigi ni lab ke tachi dushe tirwa chambudu chonchondu de sortkuyores.
So this is the inside of our ear.
Nahan tanga suge nanjok nana yopi ki
Our hair cells, which are basically special neurons, are laid out on a membrane, and the membrane is filled up like a snail.
Handa danda dirwa dinga suge hesa sisna paputa ponta anjona ne dal lenyi ge nilam bachigorwa te kariore system balaya nanjona laya ta zutan dira do chku yopi ge chipakanga ter jerde yores chumuga jerde yores.
And different frequencies of sound are basically sensed at different parts of the snail, different parts of the snail shell.
Handa te anjoko tipcha chi chochoro uchtwa te ge tipcha mando ge drag dishu mando churgu yores.
Also, we have a part in our brainstem that compares the two ears, and that's how we figure out where the sound is and how far away it is.
Timsenga suga lepa ge lekan yora lekan kana tipcha chike ko ge nanjoga yita yo nchege dai gi te durgu yores chepel te dur de te ne chilo kaza du jangthara du sa te chepen je yores.
Yeah, but with smell, whatever is floating around in the air just kind of comes in and then goes straight to a part of the cortex that deals with smell. So it's a very different organization.
That team bana that koino pigete sajakra nagona soche chimbalatre de tanga suga leshungana ko kawana ya ko isichigo patara sandru sagres nistambala ko ge isichi tanga jurumta titsama ni tangi de data betmandores.
Yeah, so I hope that helps. That was a really good question.
Te length ge choranga twate la ya and the length he periwachigis
gingal toji
yes.
Tada di onsa nishi yo. Onsa nishi kol shende tada di pena ani mendo ji shara chaw yena ro. Ta ani medon drevige tada lipi sakala yongi onsa chapandan yorwa. Ani tuzo kali ani tik thanyasa yongi onsa chapan tuzo do ani ndrawachine sena madu pena ani ki nishi do ani ki kalor tan nashi tuzo do rene ani lakachi ki shigdo. Ani tandiki chitoya gata nupade kandisni yori sano jira.
That's all. When we talk about neuroplasticity, I have heard about that reallocation of a part of the brain that is associated with deformed organs. For instance, someone become blind, that part of the brain that works with the sight is reallocated to the other organs. So how is that reallocation happens?
Oh, yes. Yes. So first of all, it is true that if you lose some sense, some other senses will kind of start taking over that part of the brain.
Handa danda churang sabate tagaranja demba res ronga suga chi wampu chi ki chunchin te churpa bana wampu ti tan revi lepa ki chashiti ya wampu shenda ki pechu tangati yongore te demba res.
So when this happens, and the way it happens is a little different depending on the senses.
Handa danda di jongtang te yang suga wampu mando la tene de te yang kun jongtang yang mando yores.
So I want to ask what your forgetting pictures look like.
That is that's just tangi remote juna ne temba jh gorwa. Temba jh remote kanda dus. Tansan baro lika chamsa gdwa. Yeah, the synapses come apart or the synapses stop to function?
Yeah, the synapses kind of grow apart. They stop communicating as much. Maybe you have less of the dendrites and axons touching.
다란자레스 타코게 튼생글리카 제티 참샤거와 지치반바나 코 가스로 코체바 지치반바나 아니 다치타 달레사 탱 바로게 투카티르와 진요안두에 되는 거로스.
But maybe these cells are getting activated by other cells.
다 지치반바나 단다 튼생 단다 코라 셀론 지고요 말 튼생 체바와 다 틴다도 체샤주가 타폰테야 타폰 리젠다게
So sometimes when you stop, let's say in the visual system, when you stop getting input from one eye, but you're still getting some weak input from the other eye, that gives the other eye a chance to take over. If you've, let's say you've lost one eye and you're not getting input from it anymore.
Take over meaning the both part of the hemisphere used for just one eye.
Yeah, well, so it's this would be a lot to go into.
Okay, sorry.
but you know, if you lose sight in one eye, the other eye will kind of take over more. It's more complicated than that, but yeah.
That's chicken of the tap do so by Bana, sugar, mix you long by Chabana, the mix and that take a colicata casugre, the mean Chaglicati Kuchu Nasha, and Chambuchigi or race.
And yeah, so some of it is when one input goes quiet, those synapses might shrink, and then other synapses that are active can kind of take over more of the connections.
That didn't do capsa. Didn't do capsa Karishigorana, Taco Casagoreta, that then Nathan didn't do capsa, Tunsen Kasichi Kusuma Bachadugua, that Tunsen Kasichi, Wama Tunsen Salon, Yobati, Shuchiru again, Nathan in the Jungores.
And that's also plasticity.
Tia, the once again, she is.
Tiwachi Karlana Chidana the Dartalin Chedua, the Wambonga Itone, Shelly go Chishedua, Zeta Lodetone. The Chidan on the Wambo Gini Maimba Chidan, the Yin on the Susi Samana like Gunze Samana night with the Yura. What the Zogi Daleba, Dartalin Chidan, the Anit and that the Wambonga Ida, the Dartalin Chidan, the Chipa Marilla. Wambonga Gini, the Yonajora, Chawa, the Dartalin Chejora. Tidan Yan Susi Nanula, Samladani, Sim Nanula, the Gunze Samana night in Yura. What the Zogi Daleba, Dartalin Chidan, Chipa Marilla.
Lasso. My question is about the transmission between the external stimulus or internal stimulus. For instance, the organs, for instance, sight, eyes, or ears. Through that, we have some neurotransmissions happen in our brain. Is that different from internal stimulation like meditation or other practices?
Well, so you know there are sensory organs and sensory parts of our brains that are usually stimulated by external stimuli.
That answer go wampu sigro, at answer chino language or it in asking answer the research in you lepagachashi or
But then one thing about plasticity and memory is that over time we have these stored representations of things in our minds.
That once the casa once and yes, she says the Tambalaya, that Tinda do Chichi drove by Bana, and it Tinda do Tempati, the Kalakalanga Castata minds in the same near the grace.
And we also have emotional memories, and we have memories of how to do things, whether we're conscious of it or not.
Timothenga Sulayan, Samyon, and David Tambaya, or a Shenda, Bana, young Asuga, Likachia, Likachia, young Tambatinda, or a Stangasuga Delaya, in some Shintachi, on some Shinta Mai by Nitangana, Likachia, and David Tambatinda, or is.
And so these are represented by very complex kind of groups of neurons acting together in the brain.
Tanda did over Tambati in Bina, Asuga, Lepiganala, and a once a task of Sopachigan, and it's Casagreta. 하정 요건정 그 우울어요 비게 남바강라야 아니 somebody yoris.
And so once we have these representations, these concepts, they could be activated by something coming in from the outside or from inside. And probably those representations are the same.
Ta lepag nang la ya ta ko ga tremba chi oro ta tremba tina do chi tangpo khora ta chi ko pa chi tip sarwa ta tre sa ba ba na ta te yang sha nga su ga ta transu long as ko ra yang sha salon chi te la ya ane chi cholo ne chen chi chong na de gra na lo ne chen chi chong na ta ka ri chong ba na khu salon chi ya ge ram ba chi oro wa o te ta chi pa res.
So I wonder if that's helpful.
That is nice. Yes, thank you.
Is there anything else? I know that Jillian, that Dr. Hugh may want to also do something with this time, so I want to make sure to make space for that.
No, that's fine. If you're comfortable to continue answering questions, I think, but I wanted to bring it back to the drawing activity, and so just like you asked about the forgetting, if there's anything else that came up from that drawing activity that they wanted to mention. And then I just have 2 images for the gap junctions that I was going to show like right at the end, but we have the afternoon session, so you don't have to worry about taking time.
Okay.
Tanda chisugo shopa remuchi tribarwa remote triba tela tena deta ya chikane ton jenda ndo tinda lanye tuya ndo tangila la tro tria ndo tinda duesa ni shenda tanda nga su gap junction sete poke na partsik la do partsik tan dewe gir mo tan tinda khachi yoti nyongkon jabla na ndo dusa
ni ngi thwa di ro tanda nganju ane wanza ngachini paruli ya ane wanza ge je lu yo ro ba wanza chima de ge 강로베 제디 차상 렌 투고 여러베 야나 하기 요레스와 하바이나 그 원장님 버루를 하 되게베 야나 나마데랑자야 로투고 요레스 요 로투바이나 아니 그 지그몰 되게 야나 로데 몰 주도를 칸디도 치레스
My question is about the processes happening at the synapses. One, the presynaptic neurons send a signal. All the signals can be taken by the postsynaptic neuron, or some of the signals just left behind in the synapses, or it is taken back by the presynaptic neuron. So if it is taken back by the presynaptic neuron, in what form is taken as an electric signal or chemical signal?
Oh.
A question with many parts, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's a good question. I have a slide for that too.
Draw pe abudus, draw la ya ta pe te chashi yang shi ye ma bodo wa ne chemindus. Draw te tan devi ki tan yen sho chi yes.
So this is my slide of what happens at the synapse. So first of all, just like electrical signals in other electrical systems, sometimes the signal just fails. That happens.
Da nga su ge lo lam tin da di mai ba go lo lam ma bu yor wa ti na san sa nga su da la ya tin da yong go ro da la ya ma bu chang go ti yong gres.
Yeah, so it's a probability thing. In a reliable synapse, most of the time the signals get through. Some synapses are very weak, so it's really, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
Da yang ko ji ya tumsen tin da do ko tumsen ya bu tin da yo pa ma na da chama pa ta ya tin da yo res yang ko ya bu tin da pa ma na san sama man do tin da yo res.
So when I talk about synaptic transmission and I teach about it, this is a point where we're showing how electrical signaling in the presynaptic cell turns into chemical signaling in the synapse, and this turns back into electrical signaling in the postsynaptic cell.
Tanda gi ji tunsam la ya da kan da stang yo me tin zan da typical sing it de pe tang yo sta de kap se tang po de la ya tunseng ngeng gi wan zugnalaya tampu loda ngu la yo pache ane loda ngu tila tene deti ne tunseng nane zeda ngu la patang yores ane tunseng nane zeda ngu la patang deta ane tanda karsa tunseng je ge wangsana les tambalaya yang che loda ngu la jurde tang pandu yores.
And so most of the success of synaptic transmission depends on neurotransmitter being released reliably into the synapse and having the right kinds of receptors and enough receptors on the postsynaptic side to excite the postsynaptic cell. So the release of neurotransmitters and having the right receptors.
Hanta tanda nga so wansa thambus tambala tambu kalsigre ses tambala thunsam ngongi wansa tigana ko wansa thambalo go yorwa wansa thamba loya te ta ane thunse jigi wansa tigala ya wansa thamba taranja lenyi ga nilen ba yomela rali yores ta tis tambala ya tampu thunse ngong tinana wansa thamba logorwa lobati ane phajo tela ya wansa thamba taran lenyi ga nilen ba yomela rali yores.
Yeah, so electrical signal comes down the axon, it turns into a chemical signal with neurotransmitter release, and it turns back into an electrical signal when the neurotransmitter binds to the receptor and allows ions to come into the cell.
Tanda bana nga su tunse ngong ge wansa ge te na ne tampo loda yong loda tele tene de te nga su wansa thamba tele wansa thamba te ane ji ngo la ro ji ngo la ya tunse ji chi do ro tunse ji chi do stambala ya ji te pha la ya ne len chi nyu te ge ne len che ba yin ba na ko ge ta tele tene de te nga su din jong go ro ka sa ta jidu tina do ko ji tang chi ko ro tele tene de te ya pha jo la ya lok da ngo la du ge res.
So also in the synapse, you have these little molecules, these enzymes that can eat up neurotransmitter and remove it, and you have transporters that transport neurotransmitter back in and take it out of the synapse. So those also affect what happens.
Te se pinga su tumsa la ya yang ko dide jenda ma bu yores ro tinse la khashi chi bana khashi chi ko wansa thamba de ko me pata sa gre sa gres khashi bana ya shenda ta da transporter se do transporter la na chende chi ni tin da ka chi la na tunsam na la ja ji ko wansa thamba de yang she shen ko de tunseng ko ngong ge wansa na ya chende chi gres.
Yeah. So I wonder if that helps clarify what happens at the synapse and what makes the synapse kind of reliable or not.
The length is that ko tunsala karindo chongma chongta tunsen ta tunsen de ko yiten choba chi rindo mundu se go ro te tai chi the length in this esa. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Madam the church tanduri. Ale. Ni to the tandati do tes dirisha. Danda de linjing liba transa de danda dachin berchung ni chungyo. Di 20 sambala dan dusir garbo da Virginia and Malujola ni lot changwa. Di malab gongla dan di tunsan barola zida tunsonga. Di baro ni da nelem bagile ni da dakin berchungla malib barda di dade kari jindo res. Zidalan dore lodalan dore di da dakin berchung mashi lot changumunda. Di baro dini kar jindo res.
Tachi kalembe
Tachi berchungla malib bardara dan di nelem bagilengelwa. Nelem bagile dan champung lu jeni dakin berchungla libgora. Ti barola dade karingola yores. Condition to res. Sir,
tampo nelem bagilengelwa
plus
nelem bagi zida gengola langwa.
Tani jini linjing du button sa di dakin berchungla dan di oxygen holola di tungura. Di malib barola di tade condition res.
Axon karsa axon no
Di malib baro dan di sir body nolan condition to res.
His question is about Tako loda matring parote segorwa, zida ta loda parote la segorwa. When the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron, they if the signal is form of a chemical signal, right? And then when it was not turned into electric signal, before that, in what form that signal travels? He says that that chemical signals is converted into electric signal in axon nodule.
So
Mari Marti, Mari,
I'm just gonna-
exam ke karila chigre lambe. Chorange exam gnane irwa. Chorange nilengi kasa thunsen ji ke thapung ke sacha chigla ya dati al udalan jurgure do chila.
Oh, the then the oxygen hello lang ko de. Hello. Oxygen hello lang ito.
Exam hello like
Oh,
that.
di la then the linyu ni batong gawa. Di mali padula daddy kandung ngolan do de. Then you did it.
Exam hello se the spelling ana do it.
Hello like this. Then the HILLOCK.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay, his question is like before the signal reaches the exohelix, in what form that signal travels?
I have another slide for you.
Yes.
So I'm going to show you this one. I'm teaching some of this again tomorrow. This is why I have these slides up here.
So the sanye zenda chitige yes ra this tambalaya and tanda ge lokta nyari dizo tagri chayes.
So for one thing, there's a lot of small excitatory postsynaptic potentials and inhibitory postsynaptic potentials that add up in a cell before they ever get to the cell body. So these are the little brown excitatory and inhibitory inputs.
Ta dilaya nga suge ka salon chini ta ani ma khre ma chagne chugora ta ni chage dati yores ro ti ta tanda ga suge thapung go lila malhe pat ani de te dagna ne nga suge dati ani do wa chigte ta nga su lenjik ni ot sukro khashim bana ko salon chini ro do chi salon mthane tir do dai bana ganti ya chag do okne na man ru do.
Yeah, you can see how little the EPSPs and IPSPs are compared to the action potential.
Ta lenjik ni wala tamba bana tanda de dan de lin ku ni ba chorwa te ka su chon chon ba de la thong do was.
So whether or not you fire an action potential depends on how much excitation versus inhibition you get.
Ta tanda ko ge ka sa wansa chi salon chi ma chi ko da chi lo ma lo te tanda de ka su nga su la ya ko la ya salon che ba ta ani de la ya ni ko ngo chi ya chi ro gra chi ro wa o te gi ani ka ta chi ka su re ta chondong ni ba de kan ro chi yo re sa te ra li yo re.
So up here, let's say you have a lot of excitation and no inhibition, you'll probably reach threshold here. This is the axon hillock, and then fire an action potential. But if you have a whole lot of inhibition like this, then the excitation can't get to the axon hillock and you won't get anything at all.
Ta tanda exohelix sa chi do wa te ngo de le mo tang po tin ba na chola ya salon chi ya ge ani nyuba te shu chambu yo pa ba na ani khurang la ya ta nga su ge chelong gwa chi wa nyuba chelong gwa te long de ta ani tanda exohelix na ne tanda nga su ge logda te tang yo res logda te tent ki yo res ani ti mai ba chi le de ta gango chi ni ge nyuba te shu chambu yo pa ba na tanda rumu ni ba de na la ya nga su ko salon chi ya ta da ta te yong yo ma res.
So, oops. So here, if you put more excitation in, you'll probably fire an action potential because it overcomes the inhibition. So it's really, do you have enough excitation to get the axon hillock over the threshold to make a spike?
Ta tanda de samba de la ta ba ba na ya ko salon chi ya ge ni wa tu shu chen bo yo tambala ya ani tanda ge ko ge linji ni ba tan sa sto ga ta za halak sa sto ha te na ne linji ni ba de ten de ta ko salon chi ku yo res.
And I think, yeah, so this is, if you see a little excitation, more excitation, and then enough excitation to reach this threshold, this electrical threshold at the axon hillock, that's when you get to fire an action potential.
Ta tanda tsujo ko parte ta bana ko selon chon chiche tigi jila selon tili chiwa chidwa tigi jela ya ani threshold system bala ya ko mantha chi selon guya chigorwa selon ya tila long sona ani ngasula ya linjuk ne ba tisne tungi yores.
And so this is also what it looks like. Usually a cell gets a lot of inputs, so you can have multiple excitatory inputs over a long space, or you can have them come very quickly, one after the other. Either way, they sum up, and the sum of that excitation determines whether you fire an action potential here.
Ta tanda thapon tigi na ne ko linjuk ne ba te so stream atten chigorwa stream atten te karela lagila na kola ya selon ka so chi thema te tigi ani ta chi chonda dombor te laga legres ta phajo te ba ko thapon te la ya ko ni mandawa ni selon ta mampuchi nga chigorwa o mampuchi wa tel tan ko la ya tampo ke cheti ke ba na yong gore ne nyo te ba na ko yongsa chikana ne ba na ko selon te thoma mampu ya jokpo ya chigorwa o tel tan ne yong yores.
So I think that's, yeah. So this you've already seen, but that's how you get from small synaptic inputs to an action potential when those inputs sum up at the level of the soma.
Ta tikare na nga su ge ta thunsam la yu chu ge ta tirwa ta salon chigorwa thunsang ge salon te ane tunse je ge wansa thaz kana la linju ni ba la tripta chigorwa ote dinado res thunsam ge na la yo pi salon te ge dombo to chondom latin dete ne ko thunsang ge je ge wansa thaz no la ya ane linju ni wa tomatin te chongu yores.
Yes, so I hope that helped with that question.
So we have about 15 minutes left before tea time, and we are hours past your bedtime. So I wanted to say thank you so much for coming back to answer questions.
Nyongko sosugla ya kamachunga smashlam du sene chorong da phala ya ta nye so ne bet yor de sha simba na chara dus yangshe phe de ta tola lende batele thuchi shayins.
I have a few slides that I'm going to show that just have some images from the slide decks you already have access to that you might be able to think through some of the questions that came up from the drawing activity.
Da da del jela ya ane lokta nya kha chi dus tengiens ti nga su ga yin zu na la da ngoma nga sun zin typical speech ta sa ju tin ro yes ta ti ta bala tan de te ne chi su ga tan da remote kap se ga yang ko ne tong kha chi dus shilongo yo ro wa ti ta ne dewat tu ti ga gro ti chi yes.
So, and I'm going to change the input on the computer, which means that they won't be seeing you anymore. So if you want to head out now, we say thank you so much. We really appreciated the contribution and the time that you spent with us.
Ane gela ge dus chto ta de la ga so concentrate ta ane ni ta ma bu ching to chi de la ya ane ha tu chi sha yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for drawing with me. Thank you for the really wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Dolang la so pa tu mo cha cha ya bu jang sos che zu cha ma la tu chi sha yes.
Well, have a good day. I guess I'll have a good night.
Yes, get some rest. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay.
Whoops! I don't want to end meeting for all.
Oh, you can. You may end the meeting because we're just going to change the input, so you can end the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes, please. Okay. Okay. So very quickly, several issues came up during the drawing, and I just wanted to show you that you have some resources that you can use to answer these questions.
Tanda checho remote kapsun da tong khachi do sia chlotan son sro tanda de la nga suge jusha jugana la ya ane nga sula de ge jusha te yores ta checho ya dina do pecho tang de tang twa te tla length he bachina ya dikyo yores ta da yochu ge jusha khachin do sungotu che yes.
So I believe this is from year 3 content. So if you have these slide decks, this is all already available, and this is how we demonstrated synaptic transmission.
Hada del luran sambag itina no tonju tinda yes te chudi open ta da ngaso tunsam la ya tunsam ni kurang ge thambati kana do me ti ge jurum ti tang yores.
And a very simplified drawing. So remember when you're showing your students that this is a very simplified drawing of the cell body, the axon, and then these, what would this represent?
Ta da de chor go thila tribi kapse dese jabi kapse di tabe once thamba tab diu shu wata kar once has this tab diu shu zo re se ting oto chi go re sta tanda do sta ba bana gela chi tan so da zumu sarwa ti kares.
Right, also it's labeled. Okay, good. So we're very accustomed to this type of transmission. So cell body has the electrical activity all the way through electrical activity. And remember, electrical activity is the movement of ions.
Da da de nga suge dina do chi thwa la ta pete te kom de yor wa ta ti kare se na thapong gu lu chi thapong gu lu ne nga suga lok da te ngor wa re mare lok che gu te ngor wa ta lok che gu system bala kar se go re se na nga suge chi du gu chu lo ku gu yor es chi du gu chu.
So my physicist, the redistribution of charge, right, is what is going to create these potentials that then cause release of the chemical message, which is the neurotransmitter.
Ta ta da chi income certificate gene te she ba na de la ya nga su ga lokhur gi khurang ge dikta chi go ro lokhur ge dikta te chi du su go da chi du ta lokhur ge dikta te man de wala te ne de te ani ku kar chi gre se na wa sa ge thamba te lo te chi ku yo res.
And if you recall, there are 2 different types of chemical synaptic transmission.
Da tanda chorang ge chi thamba su yo pa na ga su la ya thun sam la ya ani ka sa chi jida ta lo da ta ti man ro ani yo res.
In one case, the neurotransmitters released bind to the ion channels directly and open them up.
Da chikare chiga neta chikasa kare system la gansa thamba lo pata wansa thamba lo pata ma so shaja tanda gi dela kasa te nilam batela ro nilam bat jiddu gu julam chi ro judon jillo tila khan je chi jiddu julan te khachi wa chi res.
And when the ion channels open up, that creates the change in the distribution of charge that starts the electrical signal in the next cell.
This tabala ya ko chitu jilante khachi wala tane dete chidu ti ya man rugur wada ro wala tane deta ani tanda geta thapon jima ti gana la ya ani nga su ge ta linju ni bar wata lokote tungu yores.
In the other type of cells, we have the G protein coupled receptor, or we call those, I don't know, metabotropic, maybe it's labeled, but this is another entity that when the neurotransmitter binds to it, it changes something else that then opens the ion channels.
Da shenda ta tambote ga sundu ta chi chen ya de kare system bala ya and de na la G proteins G disease atures ko ga la ya once thambati jerba bana ko jawala tane dete ani tanda ge thapon ti gange ani shenda chi la jura chi ru gres.
Okay, so the ion channels still have to open so that the charge can be redistributed and that you can have electricity going in the next cell.
Hata tanda juran dua la tila tene dete nga sugi chidu ge julam ti khachi gres chidu ge julan ti khachi wala tene dete chidu ta yana lokkur ti ge ko gundam chitang la juran du gres gundam chitang la juran dua la tene dete nga suga lokda tin du gres.
So the dogma we teach is activity in the cell body, axon to dendrite, converts into neurotransmitter and then continues. Once it binds here, it creates more electricity. That's the canon we tell. So it's axon to dendrite to cell body axon to terminal to dendrites, is the story we always tell.
Hata namjing asu keche shetan bana dashi sateng na ne ko loda te do tigi jila ya tunsam lal he tunsan ne jida te le ni tigi jela ya ane ko kasata thapong jima tigi ta nila thapong orwa nila wata or tigi ane langu yoba ting asu kita namjing ge drone share chigorwa ting ngoti chagi res.
Back one more. So thank you. So while you all were talking, I just went to Google and looked for gap junctions.
Hanta danda de chesu ge keche pick up se trathone danda gap junctions particular doa partic ko chaba yes.
So what you will see here is this does not necessarily represent a neuron. It's a way that regular cells communicate with each other.
Ada danda sta ba bana ko de ane chi wansa thazu tinda ngiwa yengwa yo mares ta de thapon jenda tinda do ku su pansula ya da to ta chi goro ati chomba chi yes.
So if these are the cells and these are the cells are connecting to each other directly, this is a channel or a pore that is connecting two cells.
Ta danda de la yo pe di ka res na thapon ni pansen thya ge ana pukata ana ko ge tukati res.
Okay, so this is representing two different cell membranes, cell membrane of one, cell membrane of another, and they're connected with these channels.
Ta tanda phajolo yo pate gange te thapon chike chimuta okte thapon chike chimo yensta te parola yo page julam chidwa te tola tene titsula tene de te thapon phansula ya ne dewa te thuyores.
So these are different ways of looking at it. So the cells are connected to each other, and here's the channel between them, and there's another way of looking at the channel between them, and you can see that the channels can close or open.
Ta tanda dinga suga thapong na la ya ku thuka jatang ge chik tatang ma do res chujo de ba yok de ba na ku thapong ji par thuka jata tere julam ji de phajo te ba na res ta te ge korang ge channel buka chi gora yana julam chi gora julam te gangla remotra na je ku kha jaya yo re kha chya yo res.
So this is more cell biology. So if you were getting a PhD at Emory and you were in the cell biology program, you would know all of this information very easily.
Ta de tanda ga nesudi ka la nga su ga thapong ge ching ru pa sa gro thapong ge ching ru pa ge ko res ke te charang ge Emory ta la ya thapong ge ko la ya bana ma do ji ge yo pa ba na ne tan zu charang ga ku res.
In fact, this is a skin cell. Epithelial cell is skin, nothing to do with neurons, but these cells have these connections between them.
Da de ka res system ba su ko de nga su ge chepa yo ra papa ge thapon te na do res ta wansa thaz tan ro kro yo ma res de yang ko thapon ko ne ga paro la ya chi ga da pha to tang chi res.
And gap junctions, represented here, are just one type of way that cells talk to each other.
Da de la partsik sech the gap junction ro partsik te yang ko thapong ko paro la ya ke cha sha su ko ta da pha ton ya cha la ya ge thablan chi res.
Okay, so reminding you of all of this, when we have an axon touching another axon, and there is a channel or a gap junction between them, there can be flow of ions directly between the two axons.
Dachi saten ro dachi saten ni khurang phathu de ta da persik ju de te ne ko inshallah tuka ja yo pa ba na ne persik sa gi ta persik ti ta da junction se ta da ti ge buka ti julam ti je de te ane nga chu jid ti ane phat sun ro yo res.
So as you were walking around and you looked at the different representations in the comic, someone mentioned that there was an axon to axon, and that doesn't happen. It happens, but very rarely.
Ta tanda tangi che su dus tambala jenda gar mula tas tambala ale te dachi saten ta dachi sate thusha se tinda segdus emba na ya ta ti ya chi thusha ti chitang chungu marwas lagdus ta ko chunga chungu yo res emba na chunga te ha chang kombu res dachi sate ta dachi saten parola parts tribeyate.
So if an axon is connected to an axon directly, there is no need for a neurotransmitter because the ions can just flow directly between them.
Na hata dachi sate tu ba imba na korni ge parola ya wansa thamba gugu yo mares karchila pa na korani tuka japa ge dege tanda parchite la tene de te parchite juli ani chiduti peli la ogon person rut ko yo res this tambala wansa thamba gugu mares.
But what we need to remember is that sometimes we have to go and look for extra information to communicate the idea that we have.
This tambala ya ta de kapsa karla na ngasu ge chingutu chia ge netun tin deshe jala ya ane chia nitsu agenda thepa tina do che go ni ta chakdus.
Any questions about that?
Ti kola tro ayo sa.
Okay. And then what time is it? Oh, or
3 more minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, perfect. Okay, this is very different. So this was another thing that came up, and I wanted to, like, when we were talking, I just wanted to mention this one as well. So that first issue that I just addressed is not specific to plasticity, but it's a learning issue that came up when we were doing the learning plasticity drawing. This image, and instead of translating all of this, I'll give you the short version. And what this is saying is that training or use activity can reorganize or change the cortex. So what this is a human brain showing the activity in colors, and the brighter the color is the more activity.
So this is the section of the motor cortex that's associated with these fingers. And they provide a learning, they train you to do, touch this finger, and so it's an exercise that you can do. So if you just do the task, the very first time I ask you to do the task, this is the amount of activity you get.
So then we ask the participants in the study to practice that same activity many times over 3 weeks. And then when you check back in 3 weeks later and ask them to do the activity, you see much more activity in the brain. So in a relatively quick time, 3 weeks, you can train your brain to have a different set of activity for the same exercise. And this does not happen by additional branching of neurons or growth or any neurogenesis. This happens because of increased action potentials, increased activity, and so that was represented in some of the drawings. Sometimes the change that you see is a physical change with more connections, and sometimes the change is just an activity dependent change where you see many more action potentials for the same activity.
lenjuk ni ba ma tu ba la ten de tan chung yo res
Does that help a little?
de ge pen chi tho sa es pen ti si tho sa es a
Okay, I know that I'm standing between you and lunch. So let's take a break and then we'll come back this afternoon and do some more things. So have a good lunch.
oh ya la so ta nyong kon so tsk pa so de ta sa ge sa